so much fun.
Yeah, it is. It is fun. It's just us chatting, and hopefully some people are listening as well.
Hopefully. Back on the subject of emotional resilience.
Yes,
So
it's not going to go away so soon because there's a lot to it, isn't it?
there is, and I would really value our listeners if they have questions to just send them into us with the emails below and subscribe to the channel and all the rest of that stuff. But today we decided to talk about reality
Mm.
because this is an important part. We talked last time about um, asking the question, how you going, and actually being prepared to get close to reality. But there are different layers of reality, are there not, Jack?
Yes, they are different layers of reality, and that's we want to pull it apart a little bit for our listeners because people can get lost in it because they all relate to a layer of reality. So people have certain experiences, and we as coaches would know that because people come to us with certain experiences, with certain feelings around these experiences, and they are real. They are part of our reality. The question is, what do they point to? Do they point to what has actually happened, or do they point to an additional meaning that I'm giving this particular event, and that can cause all sorts of tangled up emotions in us. Yeah, so that needs to be fiddled apart, and it is very helpful to look at reality from the perspective of these different, we call them three different layers, as Ashkan Tashvir describes in his books, and we're using these concepts. So the first layer of reality is referring to our basically our sort of rules and laws of the universe. For example, the law of gravitation. It doesn't matter how you call it and what's really happening. You don't really need to understand it. And I know with my background in physics, there's been some discussions around the law of gravitation, but it doesn't matter. It still is a law in some form which applies to everyone anywhere in this universe. And everyone
Hang
can.
on, you're telling me there's some debate around the laws of gravitation amongst physicists?
It is a lot of the areas of physics are being revisited. Quantum physics is being extended, and the law of gravitation. There's still sort of some discussions around it,
But what you're
but
saying to me is that
it's not a
it's
discussion.
about what caused it, because the reality is that Newton's apple still fell to the ground, right?
Absolutely. That's the reality, and that's not what the discussion is about. It's obviously, it is a law that exists in this universe. Everyone knows about it. If you don't lift your feet, you fall flat on your face, or you
So
can't.
it's more about the nature of it
It's
rather
more the
than,
nature of it and what's going behind.
so it's an absolute
How
reality.
it's an
Gravity
absolute
exists.
reality, and you do want to also, for example, you want to, if you step into an airplane and the pilot doesn't really understand the reality about flying and about airplanes, you might feel a little bit insecure. So there are certain realities that run our universe.
Yeah.
And they're quite prevalent in science because you want to get to the bottom and the reality of things, so you know it's repeatable and you know how to use it for your own good. That's the first layer of reality, and we can talk a little bit more about it later, what it means in business life and in day-to-day life. The second layer of reality is a reality that we, human beings or society, has agreed upon. So we have legal agreements, we have a money system, I'm not talking about whether it's good or not. It's something that as a society we have agreed upon. We're using that type of system to exchange value. So these are all very valid agreements, but they're not. They can be changed. They're mutable. We can agree on a different money system.
And there can be
value.
debate there as to
That,
whether we should
that
go this way or that way, which then gets into politics and all the rest of it.
yeah,
Because it is mutable, it's not fixed. But
that's right.
at the same time, you need to recognize that reality. There's an old saying, say you can't fight City Hall, right? Well, because
that's right. Yeah.
that's the law at the time. Whatever is governing as the law is what will be applied in those circumstances. Whether you like it or not is not relevant. What's relevant is that that's the communal understanding, and that's a dollar's worth a dollar, and it buys you X number of chippies or chewing gum, or portion thereof nowadays. You can have a chip for $1.
Don't get that much anymore for a
You
dollar,
don't
but
get much for $1, yeah, but it's an agreed value, right? And
yeah.
it's important that people understand these agreed realities, and they can also be in the workplace, can't they? Because we've got all the regulations that run business, and that business has to be aware of. And then also inside businesses, there's agreed realities and contexts of communications and what's acceptable in that workplace and what's not acceptable in the workplace, that can go beyond the regulatory situation, but it is part of what people are dealing with, that can raise this question of emotional resilience. So we're starting.
That's right. These agreements, obviously, each business has their own processes and procedures, and their agreements. So once you sign your letter of employment, that's also an agreement. You want to understand what's in the agreement, and that's what you signed up for. And sometimes we also in business, we make maybe verbal agreements, or we have agreements between teams to do things a certain way, or we entertain some agreement with business associates, which may not be that formal. And then the agreements cannot be, sometimes they may not be really clear, or sometimes people don't want to align to the agreement. They have actually agreed to something, and then, I'm not liking that so much. Or they've agreed to something and really didn't think too much about it, the consequences of it. And this is a very contagious topic, because this is where things can get tangled up and may become unclear, or may cause resistance in people. And or conflict. That's
certainly discomfort,
yeah. And that can cause emotional reactions. All of a sudden you realize, hey, why are you not doing this? We have agreed that this is your job and this is my job, and why are you not doing it? Untangling this in a manner that is not emotionally loaded can be quite challenging.
and of course, this is where we start bringing in third level realities, because that's a personal thing, right?
That's right. That's our own experience. And sometimes people say, or sort of invalidate a person's experience. A person's experience is their experience. Whether it is relating to layer 1 of reality or layer 2 of reality, or it's a mix-up, it still is an experience, and it is pointing to a reality, and sometimes it needs to be fiddled apart. Because
sadly, we've seen of recent times in Sydney, that it can be completely disrelated to reality. We're talking about psychosis, and people still act on that perception, but that's how out of whack it can get.
That's right. It's all about having the awareness, what's actually going on, why am I so emotionally reacting to it? Why can I not the other person let explain their position? Because that's what's happening a lot. We just jump in, but we don't have the sort of the calm in us, and the stamina and the confidence maybe, to actually let the other person talk first, really understand what they're about. And this is what I think we see a lot, where people just, kind of start yelling or shouting at each other from an emotional perspective, rather than taking sort of, it's not only the time, um, taking the care to listen to what there's a reason why the other person is so emotionally loaded, maybe, and upset and frustrated. And if they're never listened to, even if it's, completely against my grain, we're not going to move forward. And I think that's what's lacking often in the sort of more, maybe more political
And we'll also,
arena.
yeah,
And
and we will often hear that, oh, look, we don't have time to do heart to hearts. Every time a decision has to be made, a leader has to make a decision, and they need to know that the troops are aligned. And this is where I believe culture is so important in business. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
actually you have to do the work before the crisis hits, if you know what I mean, as best you can. And that can be hard when you're a small business and there's only two or three of you in it. You go, goodness, we need a new team member. So you grab a warm body that you think has the capacity. Well, we're a bit like that nowadays, because finding the right talent can be difficult, let alone finding someone's a cultural match
yeah,
for what you're doing. And this is why tools such as the Being framework are so valuable, because that can give you a little bit of insight as to who you're bringing into your team and how that will fit in, and what impact that will make on the team when you talk to a practitioner about this. And we can help people with this if they want to get in touch and tell them more about it. But getting back to this three layers of reality, so our listeners are leaders or would-be leaders, leaders of themselves, or leaders of organizations and corporations. What advice would you give to them in terms of ensuring or using this tool of knowing about the three layers of reality? Why is that important for leaders?
that's a very loaded question.
I hope so, because we've got time to fill.
But there isn't. You would. Well, I think it starts by acknowledging and creating the awareness and understanding. Okay, there are three layers. So maybe I'm in a conflict with someone, or we have a disagreement, and we're not quite getting to a resolution. Then actually looking at it, what is the actual reality about the situation? So there's a reality, first layer reality, about building businesses or maintaining teams. And you said sometimes people say, or often we use the excuse, oh, I don't have the time to look after my team. But for example, there's a first layer reality that if I take some time to get to know my team members better, my team culture, or the team culture that's being developed in a business, and the productivity and effectiveness will improve. That is a first layer reality. That's not just an impression, that's not just an agreement. So really understanding, okay, what am I dealing with here? And usually it's all of the three layers. So looking at, what's not working in first layer, then looking at what's not working in second layer. Is someone not aligning to the agreements? What agreements have been made? And sometimes there are hidden expectations. People agree to a partnership or collaboration, or agree to do this as part of a project. And they may have this hidden expectation, or maybe I get away with something. And I'm not wanting to make our listeners to feel bad, or sometimes they just have if I do this, maybe I can get this, but it's not being communicated. And it is,
So,
yeah.
so I'm hearing here that well, we talk about gravity as a first level reality, and that's a really simple thing, because if any engineer wants to, or designer wants to ignore gravity, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Simple, really.
Yeah.
But you're now saying to me there are first level realities around the way we might operate in the second level realities, which is to say, if you agreed to be in part of a business, so you are now agreeing to be abiding by the rules and the processes of that business, okay? You're saying that if a boss or a leader gets involved in that and spends time understanding and working with their staff, we can create a first level reality, which is, if you do that, there's a return on your investment. Fact. I keep harping on about the engaged worker 3.5 times more productive than the disengaged worker, and
that is a first layer reality.
That's right. So it's like, and also another first layer reality. If a business is underfinanced, undercapitalized, it's likely to fail. And that's not because dollars are necessary to anything other than an agreed concept. But if you don't have enough of them, you're going to fail.
That's right.
So we should. So part of this is the importance of looking at the situation and saying, what are the realities here? What is, in my own experience, that is I can now verify is useful and experience I should use, versus my own reactions, my own internal chatter and upset and fears and storytelling. Get that under control.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we agreed last week, we're meaning-making machines. That's what we do, right? So, but this construct of saying, hang on, there are different kinds of realities, actually helps us start to sort some of this mess out. And then I also put it that it helps us communicate that in a way in which people can understand the concepts.
Yeah.
So, George, I know you see this differently, but please understand that this function, you need to pull the guard down before you hit the press button, because if you don't pull the guard down, we can't be sure your hands are out of the way. That's a first level reality.
That's right.
It's yeah.
And yeah, it is important to understand this. And first layer reality is not something that we actually create. It's just the reality of, this universe or this world. But the second layer reality we create. But then if we have an agreement to do things a certain way, it needs to be communicated clearly. And also people sometimes, you might have, your boss might say, okay, we're now using this particular process, or we're making changes, and you may have concerns. And I think these concerns are valid, and they need to be voiced and expressed and put on the table. So, the process can be adapted if needed, or the concerns can be removed and addressed. And then you mentioned the third level of reality, which is our experience and our meaning-making machine, which, there's certain facts in life, like, or let me unwind. If something happens, we can strip it down to the bare fact. So-and-so entered the room, so-and-so said this, and then left the room. That's sort of the basic facts. And we can give it meaning. We look at the person, and maybe they looked a little bit grumpy. Maybe, what they were saying was triggering us a little bit. And then we give it certain meaning, and we might give it a meaning, oh, this person just doesn't like me. They always reject me. And these are my meanings. Now, based on the meanings I give this situation, I have a certain emotional reaction, which is part of my reality, and it is pointing towards something that has happened. So we don't, we want to make sure what is it pointing to? Is it pointing to the factual aspects of the situation, or is it pointing to what make it mean? And someone might enter the room in this situation and actually overstep their boundaries and maybe say something that's completely inappropriate. And then my reaction is valid to that particular situation, but often it is not. And then when more people are getting involved, it just gets tangled up very quickly. You know, so and so has said this, and they said this, and then they react like this, and you get into this emotional soup, so to speak. And you
So
want
how do you untangle this? How do you stop this from happening?
But the first thing is, you know how we spoke about the tools, take a nice deep breath. A couple
Yeah, so first is breathe.
breathe.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Just breathe, calm your own system down, and look at the situation and really start with the facts. What has happened? What is the situation? And sort of
Mm,
unpeel it from that, and also really listen to the other person. Often we're sort of we're ready to respond in some way because we have some story in our mind. No, you want to just completely listen to the other person and see and get their viewpoint. Because if we don't do that thoroughly enough, we step over something. And we also want to pick up nuances. Sometimes people say something which is correct, and this is what they want to express, but they may not say or express the whole story. But as a leader, you also want to have the awareness and pick up on it and maybe say, is there anything else that's bothering you? It never hurts to ask the question. And then they might say, no,
mm,
that's actually it. No, or they might
mm,
say, yeah, there is something else. So you want to really, draw it all out and focus on the situation or the task or the problem, not the other person, as in you've been late, you've done this wrong. Just say, okay, the client needs this by tomorrow. We have promised the client to deliver it by tomorrow. What can we do to make it happen? Versus saying, you
mm.
have been behind, you didn't tell me. You focus on the actual
So it's
task,
we and us, not you. And
not you. Yeah,
yeah,
if someone tells me you haven't done something, I'm instantly, whether I'm aware or not, I'm instantly going into the defensive mode and shut down
mm, mm.
my barriers, and you just want to keep it neutral and open.
It's
Um,
interesting because when I'm working mediation, there's a couple of things that firstly, people need to be safe.
mm,
People need to have safety. So again, it goes to emotional resilience. If you're a leader, part of your job is to build the safety into the picture. So as that people have the space to bring their concerns to you to be
mm,
heard and know that they will be heard completely and calmly. So there's that, and then there's the when you're particularly dealing with conflict, is being heard until you're finished speaking, which can be a while. Some people can take their time, but it's important. So you can't rush these things. You
mm.
can't rush these things. The minimum you can do in mediation is 2 hours, and that's not that big a problem. Trust me.
Well, yeah, you
So,
have you have all this experience, and you certified and trained in mediation and arbitration, which
mhm.
is like it sounds like a bit of a nightmare role. Um, but
But it's interesting because it's the same. We talk about negotiation. It's all about this human component here in making people feel safe, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing a deal inside the sales office. Maybe um, maybe the one person is saying, "Well, look, I can't work with this client anymore. You have that client, right? And I'll take this client on over here." So that's kind of like an internal deal. Or whether you're doing it across continents, it's all about making the people who are doing the deal feel safe and satisfied that they've got a fair hearing, got a fair deal out of it, that are safe in doing it. And of course, there's all these different standards. But what I find interesting about the three layers of reality is you can apply them to all of them, all of them,
Yeah.
and it's just a useful way of looking at what's going on, because the closer you can get to reality, and this goes to the way of being of authenticity that jumps in here, which is about how attached are you to reality? How willing are you to look at your own beliefs and go, hang on, why do I believe that? Is that really true? And that's something I believe you should take on yourself before you start looking at somebody else and go, hey, Jack, is that really true? I know you believe that, but, hey, I don't.
That's a really good topic for another podcast, our perceptions and beliefs. It can be very challenging to recognize whether you have a certain belief or perception, but that's not the truth, or it's not all of the truth. There are different ways of looking at things.
And the more you dig through that and using these, just using the reality tools, the three layers of reality, the absolute laws of immutable laws of being, if we want to call it that way. And then there's the agreed laws of being, and then there's your experience of being, which you bring to the table. But it's a very quick way of slicing the cake, in my opinion, to get down to well, that's not real. This is a way of dealing with it, and it provides also a language for a discussion. So you're in that situation where it's getting a bit fiery. You say, okay, guys, let's calm this all down. Let's find out what's real here, what's reality. We all take a step back and look at what's an immutable fact here. What do we have to agree on? What's forced upon us? And what are we going to do about it? And then how can we bring our talents and our wisdom and our experience, that third layer, to impact on these realities we're dealing with? And so I think it's a really useful tool.
It is, and you also pointed out a really valuable note in regards to it creates a common language. So if everyone understands it, they can say, okay, we're having a conflict, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a healthy or a balanced way of conflict. But when we get stuck in it, or when the emotions get the better of us and we're not really coming to a conclusion or resolution, then there is this tool. Okay, let's take all a step back and let's look at it. And it's so incredible. People want to help. It's in our nature to help. It's in our nature to resolve problems. And we all sort of feel gratified and fulfilled if we can contribute to a project, to a resolution. And in the end, when you actually manage this also as a team leader in your team, that you resolve this conflict, people are, coming out of a meeting and they're thriving, they're happy, they're looking forward to it, they're recommitted, they know what's happening, what they need to do, and it's all resolved. Sort of it's a nice light flow, and things are moving.
When you get there.
When you get there.
When you get there. I want to go back a bit though, because I want to talk about the discomfort of getting there.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Because it is uncomfortable. It is. You are on a high alert, and you're needing to be consciously bringing your frontal lobes into play, your rational thought into play, to override the emotional drag of being in conflict. And I want to say to people, look, it's okay if you need time out.
That's a good
Take
point.
it. And
Yeah.
it's okay if somebody needs time out from the discussion. Let them have time out. Let them come back once they've rationalized their own thoughts. Don't make them stay in that moment and pressurize, and certainly do not pursue them, because nothing good comes from pursuit. Oh, no, I need to get your answer on this. I don't have an answer for you right now. That just
That's a
makes things worse.
really good point. I mean, that's your mediation and arbitration experience. You can't,
Oh, hey,
don't
it's negotiation and
yeah,
emotional negotiations
yeah,
for all sorts of things. It happens. People get upset. So
yeah.
don't allow them the space, and you don't know what's going on in their lives. And in
That's right.
this world, they might be under all sorts of pressure from home or whatever. So have that heart, that kindness to allow that to be. And I can assure you, an employee who feels cared about, now that's a really big point of engagement, right? Oh, you understand my life. It can be difficult and sometimes impossible to care to the degree that the employee needs it. That's when things have to change, right? But um, these are things that people can do to empower themselves in those circumstances. It's a first level reality, if you want. You're not going to get anybody anywhere with anybody who has just gone over the top. They're going, no, I can't cope with this anymore.
Yeah,
So let them go, or take
yeah,
time out yourself,
yeah,
because you're going to have to come back and go through the discomfort. And we see this, and in the way in which our court systems work. And you have to sit through weeks of hearings, and goodness knows to whether you find out whether you win or whether you lose. And that's awful. That is
yeah.
awful.
That is, I mean,
And
that is,
same process all the way down to negotiation, because negotiations ultimately end up on evidence that the parties believe. Okay, so it's a second level. It's agreed. It's an agreement as such. But it's that taking in and saying, okay, on balance, this is the best deal, so we're going to take it.
yeah,
And it's the same with employees, and it's the same with conflict in the office, and it's the same where anywhere you need that emotional resilience to hang in there in that discomfort zone. You've got to have your breathing. You got to have your
breathing.
bit. You got to have a blooming good reason to be there. Why? What are you trying to achieve? An understanding of what we're trying to achieve as a group and what the individual alignment. I was talking to a client the other day, and I was using the analogy of a rowing eight. If you've got eight rowers in a scull, and they're all pulling on the oars in exactly the right time, which is what the coxswain's there to do, and that's what the leader's there to do. The leader's there to be the coxswain of the rowing eight, to make sure that they're all pulling on the rope at the right moment, at the same speed, and away they go, and away they go. But if just one person is out of speed, out of sync, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
You
And
can't.
it's
Yeah,
so beautiful when it is in sync. I mean, when you watch a team
the
play,
flow.
they
Yeah,
like in the sports arena when they really play beautifully and they're in sync. It's just also beautifully to watch that. It's yeah, and it's very empowering for that as well.
so this is what we want people to create in their own lives, that empowerment to get to that stage where they're, okay, I'm making it work. And to make it work, you have to be attached to reality.
Yeah. And it's a process. I mean, you elaborated on it. It's not, sometimes I get asked, so also by sort of maybe emerging leaders, you just tell me what to do. And some of these conflicts or these day-to-day tasks, as we've now illustrated, there's a lot to untangle. And you just also need to have the stamina and the emotional resilience. That's why we talk about emotional resilience, to see it as a process. You don't always get the right result or the result you want right away. It's a process. And when you actually move with the process, as long as it is in its sort of healthy balance, then you develop your emotional resilience at
So
the same time. It's not just
he's
one.
going to say, so that just knowing that it is a process, conflict resolution, and is a process. So it's going to take time, but it will. This too shall pass. So, and in knowing that it's a process, there is some empowerment there for
Yeah,
the individual, that they're not stuck in there
that's
forever.
right. It
And
is.
there's the leader's job to ensure that that process occurs as best they can.
Yeah,
And we all know that there are some workplaces where they don't care, and I get it, but they're the ones that'll be least productive. They're the ones that are losing their talent. Because if you're,
right.
and it's your most talented employees that'll leave first, because
Absolutely.
they're the ones who can get
All
the
the time.
jobs,
It's
right? So you don't want to be left for the dross.
yeah, yeah. Wow.
So,
I think
hmm.
that was really good.
So in summing this all up, three layers of reality. First layers are the laws of being. So you got to have capital to start a company. Gravity applies. We need to breathe oxygen. Um, once you work with your staff and actually start building that resilience and that communication, the amount of time you have to spend in there will get less. That's another first layer reality, right? Then there's second layer realities, which is where we make agreements, laws, workplace regulations, deals we might do with each other, and business sales and all the rest of it, all second layer realities. And the third level realities is the way we've experienced our lives, how we've been in our life. And these are the things that we know to be true. And sometimes we have the shared experiences and we can bond over it. Sometimes we just have opposite
Yeah,
experiences, and we have to respect that.
that's right. Yes, yes.
So you don't have to come to an agreement and say, well, no, well, okay, we'll compromise. No, because it may not be possible. It may be diametrically opposed, in which case respect is necessary in that process. And that's another part of building this, using these tools to make yourself more resilient as a human being, more resilient as a leader, or a follower, as I say, because the same qualities that make a great leader make a great follower. So be a great follower and see what happens.
It's it's always these two sides that we have. A great leader also needs to be a great follower. So